All right, jumping right into it. Today we're going to tackle this kind of crazy question of why Donald Trump still has so many hardcore supporters. And this is especially interesting because historians, always rank him super low when it comes to U.S. presidents. You sent over some really interesting stuff from, what was it, Trump Reflection with subpersonalities.pdf. This deep dive is going to be wild.
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher. I mean, you've got a guy who got, what, over 74 million votes back in 2020, right? He's still a big deal in the Republican Party, but then historians rank him like 41st out of 45 presidents in that 2021 C-SPAN survey. It's kind of like, how does that even work?
Yeah, that 2021 C-SPAN survey is a good place to start, actually. The historian said things like Trump, breaking all the rules, his 2 impeachments, how he's always stirring up drama. That's why they ranked him so low. But here's the thing. A huge chunk of America, they don't agree with those experts at all. What's up with that?
Well, one thing that's important to remember is how Trump played the game, politically, I mean. He came in as this total outsider, not politician, right? Just a businessman. And his whole thing was, I'm going to shake things up, drain the swamp. That really got to people who were sick of the same old politics.
Yeah, that's interesting. His lack of experience, you'd think that would be bad, right? But it actually worked for him. There was this one quote from a supporter in Illinois, said voting for Trump was like throwing a hand grenade at the whole system. Guess a lot of folks felt like blowing things up.
Totally. And it wasn't just that outsider image. Trump also pushed policies that his base, the Republicans, really liked. Tax cuts, getting rid of regulations, and he put a bunch of conservative judges on the courts. Big wins for his supporters, even if those policies were controversial.
So we've got the outsider thing, the policies, but there's also that in-your-face style he had, always picking fights with the media, with people from both parties, heck, even with people in his own administration. It was crazy to watch. But his supporters, they ate it up.
It's true. A lot of people thought it was super unprofessional, not how a president should act. But his supporters saw it as him fighting for them. Like he was taking on the deep state, going up against those liberal elites, fighting the fake news media. And that's when it starts to be more than just agreeing on policy. It gets emotional.
Yeah, they saw him as a fighter in their corner, taking on all these enemies. But even with that, it still doesn't explain why they're so devoted to him, does it?
Nah, not really. To get that, we got to go deeper. Not just the politics, but the psychology of why people are so loyal to Trump. Researchers from UC Berkeley have even called it cult-like, that intense.
Whoa, okay, now this is getting interesting. So what's going on in people's heads that makes them stick with Trump, even when experts are criticizing him and there's proof that maybe he wasn't always right?
A big part of it is how Trump presents himself. You know, this image of strength, super confident, always talking himself up. Remember all those times he called himself a stable genius?
It's kind of like he's playing a character,
Yeah.
larger than life. And it works on certain people. But come on, is that really enough to explain why people are so loyal? It can't just be about personality, right?
You're right, it's more than that. Political psychologists talk about this thing called affective polarization. Basically, it means people feel super strongly about their own political party, and they hate the other side. It's not just disagreeing, it's like they think the other side is dangerous, like an enemy.
So it's not about having a reasonable discussion. It's more like tribal, like rooting for your team no matter what.
Exactly. And it feeds into this other thing called in-group bias. We naturally like people we see as part of our group, even if the group is something random like which political party you like.
So when people support Trump, they're joining his tribe, right? It's like a team that makes them feel like their beliefs are right and like they belong.
Exactly. And once you're in that tribe, it's really hard to leave, even when you see stuff that makes you question things.
You bring up a good point. One of the craziest things about all this is how Trump supporters stick with him no matter what. Scandals, legal trouble, nothing seems to faze them. Why is that?
Well, there's this thing in psychology called cognitive dissonance. Basically, it's that icky feeling you get when you have 2 beliefs that clash or when you do something that doesn't match your values.
So if someone's a big Trump supporter and then they see him doing something wrong, something that goes against their morals, that causes this cognitive dissonance thing.
Yeah, exactly. And to make that bad feeling go away, they might try to explain away what Trump did or say the evidence is fake news. They might even become even bigger supporters. It's like a way of protecting themselves, keeping their identity as a Trump supporter intact.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But it's still kind of scary that loyalty can, overpower critical thinking and even basic right and wrong.
Okay, but let's not forget about the whole money thing. The economy was a big reason why people liked Trump in the first place. Oh, for sure. The economy was doing pretty well before the pandemic hit. Jobs were up, unemployment was down, and the stock market booming.
Right. And even though that good economy started under Obama, Trump took all the credit. Remember all those headlines? Dow hits record high? It was like a broken record during his presidency.
And he just kept saying over and over, this is all me, this is because of me. And people started to believe it. His supporters felt like they were doing well financially, and they thought it was because of Trump.
It's funny how, in politics, what people think is sometimes more important than what's actually true.
Oh, yeah. There was this poll from CBS News back in 2023. 65% of voters said the economy was good under Trump. Only 38% said the same about Biden's economy. That's a huge difference, even though Trump hasn't been president for years.
Wow. So even though the reality might have been more complicated, a lot of voters still have this idea stuck in their heads that Trump was good for their wallets.
Yeah, that's right. And then you've got specific economic policies like those tax cuts in 2017. People are still arguing about whether they were good in the long run, but a lot of folks saw more money in their paychecks right away.
Right. It's that classic line, tax cuts, put more money in your pocket.
Right.
And it works, especially on people who are struggling financially.
And then there was all that deregulation, getting rid of rules on businesses, on the environment, on Wall Street. That was music to the ears of a lot of people. Business owners, investors, anyone who thinks the government gets in the way of making money.
So even if their own finances didn't change that much, they saw Trump as like this champion for their economic beliefs, like he was fighting for their right to get rich.
Exactly. And for a lot of people, that was enough. They agreed with him on the economy, so they supported him, even if they didn't agree with everything else he did.
It seems like money talks in politics, more than almost anything else. Okay, but there's another piece to this puzzle, and it's a tough one. The culture wars. How did Trump, like, getting involved in all that contribute to his hardcore supporters sticking around?
Well, this is where Trump really tapped into those deeper fears people have about society changing too fast. You know, he made himself out to be this warrior for people who felt like America wasn't America anymore, like things were changing too much, too fast.
Right, like he was promising a return to the good old days before all this woke culture and Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ rights.
Exactly. He said he was the defender of, like, traditional American values, the one guy who could stop all this radical social change.
And his whole thing about immigration, that played into it too. Remember all that talk about building a wall and keeping out criminals and rapists?
Yeah, and while a lot of people found that language offensive, it really struck a chord with folks who are scared of immigration. Both the economic side of it, jobs and stuff, but also the cultural side, like their way of life being threatened.
Right, they were afraid of America becoming a different place, more diverse, less white, less Christian, less traditional, whatever that means.
And Trump's message was crystal clear. I'm the only one who can stop it. I'll take back your country.
He also went after Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ rights, saying they were bad for America.
He made himself the anti-woke guy, the one fighting against the so-called socialists and Marxists, and that resonated with folks who felt like their values were being attacked, like nobody was listening to them anymore.
It was definitely a divisive strategy, but it was effective. By playing on these deep fears about culture changing, he made people feel like he was the only one who could protect them, like it was an emergency.
Exactly. And that sense of urgency mixed with the economic stuff and the whole tribal psychology thing we talked about earlier, it helps explain why people are so fiercely loyal to him, even when he does things that are controversial.
So we've got the economic fears, the cultural fears, the psychology of belonging to a tribe. But we can't forget about the media. They played a big role in this too, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. The media, especially those right-wing outlets, they were huge in shaping how Trump supporters see the world. They created this echo chamber where Trump's message was, like, on repeat all the time. And any other point of view, fake news.
Yeah, it was like two different universes. Watch CNN, and you saw a president who was always in trouble, surrounded by chaos, and watch Fox News.
Yeah.
You saw this president who was fighting a corrupt system, a hero who was making America great again.
Yeah, it's textbook information siloing. People were only getting news that confirmed what they already believed, and anything that challenged those beliefs, instantly rejected.
And Trump, he was a master at using this to his advantage. He was always attacking the mainstream media, calling them the enemy of the people, saying they were spreading lies.
And that just made his supporters trust him even more. They thought he was the only one telling the truth, the only one they could believe.
And then there's social media, which let Trump, like, completely bypass the regular media and talk directly to his people.
Twitter was his weapon of choice. He used it to connect with his followers, making them feel like they were in on some secret, like they were part of an exclusive club.
Yeah, and no matter how crazy or, like, factually wrong his tweets were, his hardcore followers took them as the absolute truth.
And social media became this breeding ground for conspiracy theories, like that whole QAnon thing that just reinforced the idea that Trump was fighting some secret war against a bunch of evil elites.
It's kind of crazy how those conspiracy theories, like totally made up stuff, can spread so fast online. It shows you how powerful social media is in shaping what people think is real.
Yeah, and even people who weren't totally into QAnon, they were still getting bombarded with all this false information. It created this atmosphere of suspicion where it was hard to tell what was true and what wasn't.
So you've got the right-wing media pushing Trump's narrative, social media echo chambers making it even louder and spreading conspiracy theories, and Trump himself using social media to go around the regular media and talk directly to his base. Like the perfect recipe for creating a world where facts don't matter anymore.
It's pretty scary, honestly, and it's a big problem for democracy. We're basically creating two separate realities, two different sets of facts, and it feels impossible to get those two sides talking to each other.
It's a recipe for disaster, total division, no compromise, no communication. But in the middle of all this, we've got the data, the hard numbers that show us how deep this support for Trump really goes. What's the latest on that? What are the polls and experts saying about how strong Trump's base is?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how high his approval ratings were among Republicans. Like, throughout his time as president, he had an average 86% approval rating with his own party. That's almost 9 out of 10 Republicans saying they liked what he was doing.
Wow, that's huge. Most presidents would kill for numbers like that. But his overall approval ratings, they weren't that high, right?
Right, yeah. His overall approval, according to Gallup, it kind of hovered in the low 40s. Never even hit 50%. There was a dip after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, but even then, his support among Republicans, it bounced right back.
It's kind of wild that something like that, which really freaked a lot of people out, didn't really hurt him with his core supporters.
It just shows you how deep that loyalty runs. And it didn't stop when he left office. Just look at the polls for the 2024 Republican nomination. Trump is way ahead.
It's like all those indictments, the legal stuff, it hasn't hurt him at all. Some people even say it's made his supporters more fired up.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. This political scientist, David Niven, he said that the worse it gets for Trump, the more his base gets energized. It's almost like they see each indictment, each accusation as proof that he's being targeted, that the deep state is out to get him.
So the more trouble he's in, the more they rally around him. That's like the opposite of how scandals usually work.
Exactly. And that's a big reason why you don't see many never-Trump Republicans anymore. The party's voters, they've basically become Trump's voters. It's hard for anyone else to get a foothold.
So it's not just about Trump the guy anymore. It's about what he represents, that whole Make America Great Again idea.
Right. And that brings us back to where we started. Why does this support stick around even when there's stuff that contradicts what they believe? What are the experts saying about all this?
Lay it on us. What are the political scientists, the sociologists, the psychologists, all those folks, what are they saying about this whole Trump phenomenon?
Well, they point to a bunch of different factors. We've already talked about the economic anxieties, the cultural anxieties, that whole tribal thing. But there's also this deeper sense of alienation, of distrust, that's really fueling this loyalty. A lot of Trump supporters, they feel like they've been ignored, even betrayed by the people in power, the politicians, the media, the institutions they used to trust.
Like the system is rigged against them. Their values don't matter anymore. No one's listening.
Yep. And that's where Trump comes in. He's this rich, powerful guy, but he makes himself out to be the champion of the forgotten man, the voice of the silent majority. He tells them their anger is justified.
He gives them someone to blame, an enemy to fight. The deep state, those liberal elites, the fake news media. It's a simple story, but it's powerful, especially for people who feel like the world's passing them by.
And this whole us versus them thing, it just makes it worse. It's like compromise is a dirty word. The other side, pure evil.
Yeah, it's a scary situation. Makes it almost impossible to have a real conversation, to find common ground.
It's a huge challenge, no doubt. But even if we don't agree with Trump supporters, trying to understand why they feel the way they do, that's a good place to start. It's about figuring out what's driving their anxieties, their anger, their sense of being left behind.
It's about empathy, right? Trying to see the world through their eyes, even if we don't like what we see.
Exactly. Because if we can understand each other, then maybe we can start to fix the stuff that's dividing us. The economic inequality, the cultural fears, the fact that no one trusts institutions anymore.
That's a big ask, but we got to try.
We're living in some crazy times, big challenges that aren't going to go away on their own. We need to understand what's happening, why people support figures like Trump. That's how we navigate this mess.
Wow, that's a lot to process. Thanks
Yeah.
for taking this deep dive with us. It's given us a lot to think about.
It was my pleasure. And to our listener, thanks for sending us these sources. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, keep learning about this. Keep asking questions. Get different perspectives. And keep talking to each other, even when it's hard.
Because in the end, if we want to keep our democracy healthy, we got to understand each other, even when we disagree.
And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.